All right. So, very well. All right. So I think with that, we can focus back to our class and be able to see what we want to do. So as I had indicated in the introductory remarks, that today we are looking at educational leadership. And we said, what a coincidence to look at educational leadership on such a week when we are having such discussions. Don't ask what kind of discussions. Now, in this evening learning, we intend to look at, to cover about 3 critical learning points. One, we intend that by the end of our discussions this evening, we should be able to look at the essential components of educational leadership, the essential components of educational leadership, to try to understand what is educational leadership. Once more again, I'll be indicating that although our topic is structured as educational leadership, once more again, I'll be making illustrations to indicate that perhaps educational leadership is the climax of leadership, is a form of leadership that we can learn on how to do leadership in other institutions. So we may as well talk about institutional or organizational leadership as we talk about educational leadership. Second, we'll be able to look at various theories, a few. The word is selected educational leadership theories, those theories that punctuate and guide leadership, especially in educational settings. But once more again, we appreciate that this should be extended to other institutional and organizational form of leadership. Thirdly, and last, we'll be able to make a general survey of the fundamental qualities of educational leadership. So we'll be able to make a survey and be able to say, this is what we think about the qualities of a good educational leader, and be able perhaps to put our footprint on that, our fingerprint on that, and be able to say ourselves, this is what we think about educational leadership. Now, to take us through from the beginning, we wish to understand what leadership is. You know, understood from my general point of view, what is leadership? I begin by indicating that various authors attempt to define what leadership is. Various people talk about leadership. Various writers talk about leadership. Generally, we distinguish between formal and informal leadership. Formal, we are talking about situations where a leader perhaps is elected, a leader is perhaps designated, and so forth. You can be able to say that is the leader. People can be able to say so-and-so is our leader by virtue of an office. Informal in the sense that we can talk about leaders, we can talk about leadership, which does not necessarily take official positions of authority. Talking about leadership in the formal sense, leadership has been defined as, or can be understood as, the intentional influence which is exerted by either one person or by a group over people, over groups of people, to structure the activities and relationships in a group or an organization towards a designated goal. So you see, in leadership, when we talk about it formally, we are emphasizing that leadership is an intentional influence. So leadership in the formal situation is not accidental. We don't say that this person did this, or this person is our leader, yet in the actual sense, the kind of influence that has been exerted that we are experiencing is accidental. He didn't know about it. No. Leadership in the formal sense is actually intentional. You move out deliberately to bring about an influence towards certain set goals. So later we'll be saying that based on that understanding, leadership has a concept of a social influence. You are influencing people within a group. And as I've said, leadership is not only formal. We can talk also about informal leadership, you see, whereby we understand it correctly in the context of a process rather than in the context of a position of authority. So that we are talking about in that school, you may not be the head teacher, you may not be a head of department, you may not be, the master on duty or mistress on duty. But whenever you find yourself in that staff room, people feel they cannot make a decision without saying, what do you have to say about this? And that's why I'm saying, quoting together with Macbeth and Dempster 2009, that teachers in their own right, they are leaders irrespective of the positions they hold. That's why you find, for example, in the societies we come from, in the towns or cities, villages, situations we are in, people would want to get the opinion of a teacher. So we are leaders in our own right. So that is how to understand generally leadership. That's a general conception of leadership understood as both formal and informal. Now, during my readings, I asked myself that there are so many terms, several terms, that are allied to the term leadership. Such terms may include concepts like management, concepts like administration, and many other similar terms. I sought to focus on the distinction between leadership and management. I begin with trying to understand what management is. You see, the work of managers is to ensure that the available resources are well organized, that these resources are applied appropriately so that an institution, an organization can achieve the best results possible. So managers focus on formal directing and controlling of their assistants, those who work below them, of the resources given to them. Managers focus on structures and systems that work towards a given result. So managers are about directing, they're about controlling, they're about focusing on their assistants, the resources and structures and systems so that the best results are obtained. According to Kotterman, 2006, managers aim to reach short-term goals. They aim to avoid any risks within an organization or institution. Managers aim at establishing standardized or improved efficiency. So when we are talking about managers, there is little of the concept influencing people. Indeed, effective management depends upon three special skills. The first skill is what we call the technical skill, then the human skill, and the conceptual skill. Technical skill generally refers to the proficiency in the specific type of work, proficiency in the specific type of work. For example, we can talk about the competencies that somebody has. So here, we're talking about proficiency. Do you know? So much so that when we talk about a head of a school, a CEO of a company, as a manager and talking about technical skills, then we may want to ask ourselves, has this person gone for any specialized training in the relevant skills? So we ask, does he have the technical skills? We want to say that if somebody is a minister of education, a cabinet secretary for education, a cabinet secretary for ICT, if we talk of that person as a manager, then when we talk about the technical skills that he needs to have, then we are asking ourselves a question. Does he have the proficiency in that field? For example, is he a trained teacher so as to understand the goings within education? If it is ICT, does he have a background, a training, a proficiency in that field so as to understand what happens there? That is technical skill. We talk about human skill when we are referring to the ability to work with the people. So this ability to work with the people will allow a manager to assist group members to complete their tasks. So this is now what we talk about, the human qualities, the human skills. People talk about interpersonal skills, the ability to work with the people. Remember here, we are not necessarily talking about influence people, but simply the ability to work with the people in a manner that you as a manager, you are able to assist. The idea here is to assist, not so much to influence, because we'll be using the term to influence specifically to refer to leadership. So in management, we're talking about the ability to assist the group members towards completing a given task. We talk about conceptual skills to refer to the ability to work with ideas. Do you understand? Once more again, I get to the idea of the cabinet secretary for education. We want to look at you not as a leader, but as a manager. And then conceptual skills would be when we talk about the workings in classroom, when we talk about the relationship between a teacher, content, pedagogy, do you understand? Or do you view it from a background of medical practice whereby you'll be able to say, normally, when we inject a given medication, the body must respond. So as to say, you will be telling teachers, you need to do this so that this happens. So we're talking about, do you conceptualize what goes on in that kind of situation that you are a manager in? Once more again, effective management is about how you gain and control these three levels of skills: the technical skill, the human skill, and the conceptual skill. Now, we look at leadership so that we can understand the relationship there between management and leadership. When we talk about leadership, we understand it as a multidimensional phenomenon, to mean a phenomenon that has several dimensions, several facets in our struggle to understand it. For instance, Northhouse 2007 defines leadership as a behavior, as a style, as a skill, as a process, as a responsibility, as an experience, as a function of management. You get those attributes. Northhouse looks at leadership as an influence, if you like, an influencing relationship that those who you are working together with are receiving an influence from you. He puts it that leadership is a characteristic in a person, not so much of, as he has said earlier on, a kind of simply a position that you get into. Even when he uses the term position, he annexed to it position of authority, meaning there must be something in you, because we can have these two people, both of them ascending to that position. Yet we see one ascends to that position, something happens. The other ascends to that position and it's difficult. In understanding what North House is saying, and with due respect to our kind of socio-political inclinations, is not good to talk about the dead, but I want to talk about a cabinet secretary in this country whom I've always admired, Mishuki. I want to talk about that, and I don't want to talk about those who are living. Mishuki. This is one man that got into a given ministry, whatever the ministry was, and he makes that ministry become the most important thing in the country. Take him to environment, we can see many trees that are planted around major rivers in towns and so forth in this country up to date, after his death. Talk about public transport, whether it is done perfectly or not, we can still see the city bells, whatever it is. We are talking about not just a position, but we are talking about a characteristic, an ability that assumes the authority within that position and makes something to happen. Kotia 1990 looks at leadership as the capacity for collective action to vitalize, to bring to life. So leadership here is seen as the capacity to bring to life. We can only talk about bringing to life that which we thought was dying or was dead. Many examples of this can abound. And that's why I had said earlier that I had wished to get somebody to talk to us about leadership, to tell us how he sought to revitalize certain institutions and so forth. Other people define effective leaders as people who serve others while those others follow them. So you see, leadership has a concept of following. You see, management does not have a concept of following. You don't need to follow, quote unquote. You don't need to follow. You don't need to follow a manager. But leadership has a concept of following. So in leadership, we are likely to talk about followers than supporters. Peter defines a leader as someone who has followers, indeed you can get. While House and Aditya believes that leadership is a form of a social influence process. Florence, you have something to say.
Yes, Mwalimu, you said followers and supporters.
Yes.
Are those different or they're the same? Because if I look at political leadership, I see, if I can use the example of Baba, if you permit me,
yes,
I've always looked at and seen like his supporters are his followers. Whether he moves, whether he fails, whether he goes through or he doesn't, they stay the same. So what's the big difference between supporter and follower?
Yeah, perhaps before I respond to that, I can see the hand of Getare. Getare, would you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something.
Yes.
that when you are a supporter, it is much stronger than a follower, because I may be following you, but I'm not supporting you. I may be talking good about you in public, but when I go into private, I will not support you. So to me, being a follower is different from being a supporter. Being a supporter is more intense. It has more iko na uzito kuliko someone who is following. Yeah.
But you see, Getare, just to laugh through what you are saying,
Yes.
you've said that being a supporter is more critical, is more important than being a follower.
Yes.
Now, more important to who? More important to the one who is being followed, not so?
Yeah, yeah, to the one who is being followed.
Now, you see, you are right. If you look at it in the context of the one being followed, iko na uzito, the way you put to use your words, in the context of the way was it Florence who was talking, that
Yes.
if you are to talk about Baba, then you are saying iko na uzito to Baba.
Yes.
But you see, when we're talking about supporters and the followers, my conception, and I get back to respond to the issue raised by Florence. My understanding, and I would like people to weigh in on this, my understanding. You see, followers are about, we don't need to understand you. Ours is to follow what you are asking us to do. Supporters, in my understanding, is that if I end up changing my position or changing, as people would say, my mantra, or changing my what I stand for, you could have been supporting me for what I stood for. So if I change it, you no longer would support me. But following, in my conception, I understand it to mean it doesn't matter. You don't need to understand me. You don't need to understand if I say turn right, you turn right. If I say go three steps to the right, you do it. Don't ask, but is there a snake in that direction or whatever it is? So move. So that's why I'm saying that when I talk about followers, and Getare, I'm on you, when I talk about followers, and remember we are talking about leadership, whipping, influencing a group of people towards certain goals. That's what we're talking about. You are influencing them. The issue is not what is the extent to which you are asking them to look at or to rationalize on the influence, whether it is right or wrong. The idea is, I have the capacity to influence you to follow what I'm trying to come up with. Jen, would you like to say something? I saw your hand up, Jen.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Tari. My thinking is,
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to relate it to what happens in Facebook or Instagram.
Yes.
You may have so many followers, 1,000,001 followers.
Yes.
These are just people who are cheering you on when you say, let's go to Kisumu. Yes, they cheer you on. They may not necessarily be going to Kisumu, but they will cheer you on. Yeah? Mm-hmm. But I feel supporters are actually the ones who are agreeing with your ideas and helping you to spread or to apply those ideas that you have.
Correct.
Because if I support you, then I will help you to finance. I will probably give you direction and say, okay, instead of going to Kisumu via Ahero, maybe let's pass through Londiani or a different route or whatever it is. But if I'm following, I will just cheer you. Kisumu, we go, yes, we clap, and that is it.
We reach there and you are not there with me.
I am not there. I just said, yes, let's go. And yes. You say, these are my followers. But the supporters are the ones who will actually even come and be on that entourage with you.
Mm-hmm.
That is my thinking.
Good. Amata, you want to say something? You want to weigh in on this, Amata?
Yes, Daktari, good evening.
Good evening to you.
Just to add on what my sister said,
Yes.
Because you have something we really truly believe in,
Yes.
we will support you as supporters, and we'll support you with expectations
Yes.
that probably when you reach there, there's something we are going to get, and that's about interest.
Good.
And because of that interest we are having, we will fully support you with skills, we'll support you with finances, just to make sure you are there.
Good.
So that you get what you want. And that is supporters, not and not followers. Yeah. Yeah.
Sanya, you want to say something?
Yes, Daktari.
Yes.
I want to, first of all, seeking a clarification of part 5.
Yes.
Where you've said a leader is someone who has followers.
Yes.
Then there's a point like you must have said that not necessarily a supporter. Was that so?
Yes, yes.
Okay, if that is the case, yes. Now I want to submit as follows that
yes.
Someone who is a follower is a disciple.
Yeah.
Or a mentee.
Yes.
Okay, I can refer to the life of Jesus when Jesus came to this world and he lived amongst us. He actually created followers in the name of disciples. And as he left, these are people who have continually propagated, one, the values, the influence, and all the good attributes that Jesus had. So a follower is someone who actually who has bought into your ideas, values, and influence with all the knowledge. But I tend to believe that a supporter may not necessarily support you because of your values. Okay, the good praises that you may be having, but a simple support, but they don't buy to ideas. That is my submission.
Correct. Taslin, you want to say something? Taslin?
Yes, Dr. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
For me, I feel like a supporter is maybe like a person who follows someone blindly. If you say monkeys say monkey do something like that. I mean, like you don't even want to know what someone is doing. You don't want to know their values. You just follow them. If they say you do this, you do this. But for a supporter, it's more intentional and it's more deliberate. And they also just come in to give their input and they know what they believe in your values. And that's why they follow you. For supporters. Thank you.
Yes. Waruku, you want to say something?
Yes, thanks, Mwalimu. I think colleagues have actually expressed it very well. I only wanted to add something little.
Yes.
By indicating that when we are talking of followership, it is earned. It is total loyalty. It is based on what in the minds of the followers, it's proven, it's tested, it is like there's just no way it can be wrong. In that case, you'll find, I don't know how many were there in the 2005 referendum. In the 2005 referendum, when Wako carried that draft constitution, and Raila said that that constitution is not what you are looking for, it is bad. There are across the country people who said Raila has read it, and he has said it is bad, so it is bad. That is real followership. And I think somebody likened it, the followers of Jesus Christ, but also the followers of Jesus Christ, they also defend the faith. They defend that faith. So when it comes to the supporters, something or someone with something, they are supporting based on the ideologies, for example, or because they're innately related in that the success of whoever they are following is actually the success of what what they also see themselves achieving. To the extent, in other words, there's a particular stake in it. If they realize that the person that they are supporting is not going to help them achieve it, they can depart from that and look for something or someone who can help. That is how I understand it. Thank you.
Correct, Waruku. You know, that's why I said in the initial words during this class that I had been trying to look for the VC from about 2-3 days ago, but didn't manage to get him to be here. And it's unfortunate that we are talking about leadership. And sometimes when we talk about leadership, I'm trying to contextualize this debate we are having. We tend to talk about leadership is about that leader succeeding. I want to use some questions, some illustrations based on Daystar University. And these illustrations are likely to be stale because the VC is not here. But if he was here, I would have locked him in a room and asked you people a question so that he does not hear it. We give responses, and then he comes in and we ask whether those responses we are giving, he would have given the same responses. I would have asked. You see, we've been told he's the best VC in the country. We've been told he seems to have the best leadership skills. We are talking about him as a leader of an educational institution. Therefore, we are talking about educational leadership. We've been told Daystar is the most sought after university. Now, the question I'm asking, which we would have asked ourselves and asked Professor Airo to keep quiet, would have been this: that Professor, when you've been working to reach this goal that is now being announced now, were you working so that your name can become great in this country? Were you working so that you can be pronounced to be #1 VC? Was that one of your targets? I'm imagining he would have said no. That his was to do the best thing at the right time, the right place, whatever that dictum, you know it. So much so that I'm imagining if we went on to interview him, and if we went to talk to people who have worked closely besides him, I'm one of those who have worked very closely besides him in other institutions, one would say that this is a man who has the power to influence people. When people are kind of getting tired to do what is right, he has this spirit of making you do it again. When you want to give up, he has this idea of making you to do it. And as he makes several people to do it, people believe that if it is so and so who has said, we better do it. People become followers. Let me repeat that concept that we have debated upon. People start supporting the institution, not the person. A leader is not about his person, her person, but I'll be concluding in my very last slide whereby I'll be saying A leader is about the goals of this institution. A leader is about the goals of this organization. And a leader is about how do I exercise social influence for us to reach that goal. That's how I'll put it. Let's make some advances. So you see, having looked at those apparent distinctions between management and leadership, it is then important to conclude about how we conceive leadership to be. Two concepts stand out as defining leadership. You know, these concepts indicate that leadership is a process of influencing a group of individuals to do what? To obtain a common goal and to develop a vision. So leadership is not about people struggling to make me succeed, but people being influenced to make the institution to succeed. Leadership focuses on two things, on motivation and inspiration. A leader is able to motivate, a leader is able to inspire. Leaders, the word is supposed to be attract followers to follow. Leaders attract followers to follow. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. There could be a lot of challenges. That's why I kind of I allow this concept to remain in your minds for debate, but I'm trying to reveal that the reason why I tend to be inclined towards the concept following is that even when things become hard in that institution, there is the concept of people are still motivated, are still inspired. So when we're talking about leadership, we are talking about somebody being able to push other people to obtain, to realize a common goal and to develop a vision. Leaders aim at creating passion to follow the vision. So they create that passion in people. Leaders aim at really, reaching out for long-term goals. You see, management was about short-term goals. Leadership is about long-term institutional goals. Leaders themselves, plus the people whom they influence, would be inclined to take risks to accomplish common goals. Leaders challenge the status quo. So leaders, if you like, there are people who will push against the frontiers of organizational or institutional, whatever, management, as it were. Leaders push beyond those frontiers. However, as thinkers and other authors would say, the leader must always keep an open eye on his followers' benefits. You see, leadership is about institutional goals, but now it should be upon the leader, within the leader, so that as people follow, let's use all the terms, as leaders follow, as people follow, as people support your idea, as it were, it should lie upon the leader to keep an open eye on the benefits of his followers, so that by doing that, he can now push the people to follow. Let me mix up the terms: to follow, to support, to make him their leader voluntarily. So we are saying the leader here directs the follower by using sometimes what we'll call later a transformational style of leadership. I can see some hand up there. Brenda, you have something to say. Brenda?
Not
Right.
really. I think my hand just remained up. I wanted to contribute on the issue of followers and supporters, but I think it's okay.
All right. All right.
my
And
hand
then maybe we make some progress. We make some progress to that. And then let's make some progress. So we are talking about, yes,
Doctor,
was that Cindy? Yes, Cindy?
so I just want to confirm.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen the conception of leadership. My question is, do we have people in the leadership positions
Yes.
who are not leaders really?
No, you know,
There's-
Cindy, I want to defer this question. Nobody should respond to it because we'll be asking you at a given point to tell us what are leadership positions. You know, because at one point I'll ask. Let me just throw a tongue in cheek here. The presidency of this country, is it a managerial or a leadership position? Don't respond to it. Think about it until that time comes. I think you get the joke, eh? You get the joke.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll come to it. We'll come to it. So we are saying that over and above all, you know, as Kapowski 1994 would put it, leaders should have some critical qualities such as integrity, vision, toughness, and so forth. We'll be coming back to this when we talk about qualities of effective leadership. That's why I'm moving there a little bit fast. House 1977 adds that leaders should have charisma, should have a sense of mission, should have the ability to influence people. So what I can say in a nutshell is that when we are looking at leadership, as we keep the debate moving during this discussion, I think we need to weigh three things. Leadership, when we talk about leadership, we need to weigh three things. The interests of the leader, it could be his good name. It could be his self-interest, as it were. So the interests of the leader. Two, the interests, if you like, benefits of the people or to the people. And thirdly, institutional interests. So I think as we talk about these things and the discussion continues, we need to see and think about how these three things will be married along the way. We now look at the rationale for good leadership. We look at the rationale for good leadership, specifically educational leadership. So when we're talking about rationale, we are asking ourselves, why? We are asking ourselves, what is the justification for us to discuss, to struggle about the need for good educational leadership, good educational leadership? Now, there are three things to note. First one, we talk about institutional improvement. You see, leadership by itself must be seen as a prime factor in a struggle to improve school effectiveness. You see, we're talking about those schools that could be collapsing. We're talking about those schools where perhaps teachers have lost, the zeal to go to those classrooms and teach. You remember our last week's lecture. We're talking about those schools where parents are withdrawing children. Good educational leadership makes a difference. We are saying effective leadership in our schools, in our organizations, in our institutions can improve them. So the first and the fundamental rationale for educational leadership, for good educational leadership, is pegged on institutional improvement. Number two, we're talking about learner achievement. Learner achievement. Now, when we talk about learner achievement, it's as it were talking about the interests of the core business, as it were, of that organization. The interests of the people who benefit from the core business of that organization. If it was in a bank, you are talking about customer satisfaction. If it was even in that organization, still we'll be talking about that. So because we talk about educational leadership, we talk about learner achievement. And we are observing that learner achievement in a school will rarely exceed the quality of its leadership. So when you talk about, that school, the performance of those learners, and performance here is not simply an issue of academics. Remember, we talked about this last week. We're even talking about the moral development of those learners. We are saying learner achievement in any institution, in any learning environment, can never or can hardly exceed the quality of the leadership. So you notice this thing we're talking about, leadership. Leadership is a hallmark of what will explain the performance of the learners, be it cognitively, be it morally, and so forth. So always you find good leadership is often strongly associated with good school performance. Sometimes we say failing schools or failing institutions can be turned around cannot be turned around in the absence of good leadership. The third rationale, the third explanation as to why we are interested in good educational leadership is about improving classroom teaching. Indeed, good leadership is not only important in itself, not just because people need it, but indeed good leadership is also a powerful way to improve, to enhance class teaching. Before we look at the challenges of educational leadership, I see Nalondo's hand up. Nalondo.
Thank you, Dr. I think my hand was up a little bit earlier when you were introducing leadership.
Then understood.
I wanted to just make a contribution on what leadership was.
Yeah.
In addition of what you said. Sorry. I really loved the fact that leadership is all about influence, and I wanted to break down the influence part so that I can also add something to what you said.
All right.
That influence, I've always broken it into as follows. To mean integrity, that a leader must have integrity at all times.
Mm-hmm.
You do your things in honest and truth. And N to mean nurture, that as a leader in any capacity that you are in, you're able to nurture talents, you're able to nurture your troops, you're able to nurture those who are below you. And F to mean faith, that as a leader, you must have faith in yourself and faith in the team that you lead. L to mean listen, that as a leader, you must have capacity to listen to the people around you, to listen to the people below you, for the organization to grow and for you to be able to accomplish your common goal. And you understanding, of course, understanding is simple to understand everyone. We have leaders who don't understand their juniors. They will never understand their problems. They never put themselves in their juniors' problems. And therefore, as a leader, you have to be understanding. E, emotionally intelligent. There is a leader, you must be emotionally intelligent. You must be able to handle your issues in the right manner. You must be able to handle your emotions well. And N, navigate through trouble. In more occasions, we face challenges. As a leader, you must be able to navigate through the challenges. You must be able to navigate through the troubles that come your way as a leader, so that you can be able to take your troop. I keep using the word troops to mean those juniors. Of course, with the understanding that I'm coming from a security perspective. So troops are juniors, the people under you, so that you must be able to navigate through challenges as a leader. Then C, communication skills. Of course, we are all coming from organizations where you look at a leader and ask yourself, who actually made this person a leader? Simply because he has or she has the poorest communication skills to the juniors. She doesn't understand people, or they don't understand people. Very poor communication skills. And lastly, exemplary. As a leader, you must be an example to your people. You must be an example to your troops. You must be an example to your juniors. Otherwise, you cannot be telling people, come to work at 6 a.m. and you are coming to work at 11 a.m. Then who are we following as members of the community? Thank you, Daktari. And
Asante.
that's what
Asante. I think I'm amazed, and I would request that you put that in the chat. Let's make some progress before I come to those hands that are up. So we are saying that as we talk about the justification for educational leadership, we are alert to the fact that there are a myriad of challenges. There are a myriad of obstacles, issues that challenge us in trying to execute and understand educational leadership. That's why I'm raising just but two here, two that I believe can carry many others. So one of these is the context, the context in which we are carrying out or we are exercising leadership. So we are noting that, leadership will vary according to the context. For example, according to the extent of autonomy in schools. For example, we'll ask ourselves, you are a leader in that school. If you look at yourself as a leader, a principal, a head of department, who appoints teachers in that school? You are a head of department of humanities or of given subjects. You are looking for a teacher to teach geography, to teach chemistry, and so forth. Who appoints, who helps to recruit those teachers? Are teachers simply individuals pressed down on you? That's what we're talking about, issues of context. Now, in talking about the issues of context, we are quick to note that there is a need to ensure that leadership is always sensitive. We need to ensure leadership ought to be sensitive to context, and that leadership development activities should also reflect the local circumstances that we find ourselves in. So the context is an issue. We are also asking ourselves, how do we measure, how do we ascertain the individual impact of a leader? We're talking about, there are these people, take them from this school, take them to the other school. A school is collapsing here. Take this person to the other school, the school rises up. Now, remove that person from that school or that university, take him to head the other university or the other school. That is the Michuki I was talking about. But even as this person is moving around institutions, and institutions are either rising or dying, as it were, the question is, how do we ascertain the individual, impact of that leader? Because we are alert to the fact that leaders work through the instrumentation of other people. So besides this, we have other challenges, e.g., challenges of training, challenges of skills, and so forth. So these are just to indicate, indeed, there are some challenges to educational leadership. We now transit now to this area where we would like to discuss some of the major theories behind leadership, major theories around leadership. And I'm making my citations from Cherry K 2016, as you can see it, and then Van and Rafik 2022. You can see those kind of citations. And from these citations, you know, we derive about 8 theories. There are many, but 8 theories come up. Our topic asks us to look at selected theories. So I bring up these 8 theories for discussion. There is what we call the great man theory, the trait theory, that's the traits within people, the contingency theory, situational theory, behavioral theory, participative theory, management theory, or what we call also transactional theory, and the relational or transformational theory. Now, from this theory, we are able to derive really the various typologies, types of leadership orientations. So for now, let's look at each one of these just to understand each one of these theories. So you can see those theories there, whereby I'm giving this table before you, whereby I indicate the theory and I summarize the general conception of that theory. So through the lecture, we try to discuss that conception. So let's look at what these theories mean. Yeah, you see, we begin with the great man theories. We use a plural, theories, because within a theory, within a given understanding, there could be various types of theories. Various types of leadership styles. That's why some authors don't talk about great man theory, but they talk about great man theories. Now, according to these great man theories, the belief here is that the capacity for leadership is always inherent. It is inborn within an individual. That's what we're saying. According to great man theories, great leaders are born, they are not made. They arise to leadership when the need comes. So here we're talking about the great leaders, great principles, are not trained, are not, developed, as it were. Rather, people, as Shakespeare said, they are born leaders. That's what the great man theory says. So great leaders are simply born with the necessary internal characteristics. Such characteristics may include things like, the charisma in people, the confidence in people, the intelligence in people, the social skills, and the heroic dispositions that we find in people. So we're saying that these attributes, which according to the great man theories are inborn, make them natural leaders, make these people to be just natural leaders in such a manner that the theories believe that they are destined to rise to leadership when a chance will call upon. So this term, great man, is simply indicated so because, it is a concept that came up when it was felt that, leadership is about a male quality. This is an ancient concept which cannot hold true now, but just to explain why it's called a great man theory. So the most critical thing is that great man theories indicate that leaders are born, they are not made. Leaders arise naturally to leadership positions in situations when situations calls for it. Now, the trait theories, on the other hand, indicate that leadership is inherited. Is something, we are now talking about traits, not just leaders being born, but we are talking about certain skills, certain leadership skills being looked at as traits of leadership, characteristics of leadership. And the argument here is that not simply born, not simply trained, but rather the concept here is that leadership is inherited. So here we are arguing that people inherit certain qualities and traits that would make them best suited to be leaders. So the trait theories identify particular personalities, particular behavioral characteristics as the defining elements of good leadership. So whether you want to talk about self-confidence, whether you want to talk about courage, somebody wants to say in that family, the father was a chief. We have come across a grandson. We have come across a son, or rather a grandson or a son who is as courageous as the father or as the grandfather. Therefore, he shall become our chief. Trait theories of leadership is about leadership being inherited. So somebody posed a question a while ago and, came closer to saying that could it be that there are some people who are not supposed, I want to add the word supposed, she never used that word. Is it that there are some people who are not supposed to be leaders, but find themselves within leadership positions? You see, one of the criticisms against the trait theory is that we indeed have many people who may possess personality traits that are associated with leadership, yet many of these people may not be leaders or may never even seek positions of leadership in society. And sometimes evil abounds in the society when good people do nothing. If there are many people, good people, who could be MCS, but they never rise even to vie for MCA-ship, but that position has to be filled, then we'll talk about people who have traits to be MCS, but they never rise to that position, and the people who do not have that trait rising to that position. I think this partly responds to the question that was posed some times back. Now, the contingency theories, on the other hand, looks at leadership as being contextual. The word here is leadership is contingent on the context. That's how to understand those theories. Contingency theories are about leadership being contingent on specific contexts. So according to these theories, leadership is simply contextual. So there are multiple contextual variables that would coalesce together, would come together to determine which particular style of leadership can best be suited in a particular situation. So contingency theories would say situations determine the type of leadership. Maybe let's go back again. You see, the great man theories indicate that leaders are born. You see, leaders are born. They will simply emerge. And the idea could be that insofar as these people are still around, don't waste your time you want to become a leader, because this man, this woman was born a leader and he's still around. Great man theories. Trait theories. You want to become a chief. Who in your lineage has ever been a chief? Trait theories. Contingent theories is about look at the circumstance, look at the situation. Situations dictate the style of leadership. You see, in the first theories, great man, you see, situations don't determine. People are born leaders. So if these people are born leaders, they'll simply lead. Trait. They have the traits of being leaders. Contingency. Situations determine the leader. or if you like, leadership style. Now, when we talk about situational theories, now, I would like to summon your attention to see the thin line between situational and the contingency theories. There is a very thin line between these two. You see, for contingency theories, we are saying successful institutional leadership will normally depend on a number of variables. So, this would include the styles of leadership, the qualities of the followers, the aspects of the situation. All this will gang together to determine what can be understood to be successful institutional leadership. Now, for situational theories, the argument here is specific situational variables. Now, here we're talking about specific situational variables may actually define specific styles of leadership. You see, the difference so far there you can see. Contingency theories is about saying that all contexts that look like this will always require leadership styles that look like this. For example, somebody would argue, and we'll be seeing that in some of the slides, that where we have a great man, quote unquote, a great man, a man born great, great men, or rather great people, will always be the leaders wherever they find themselves. You see, that's contingency. That's an element of contingency. That all situations that look like this one will always have this type of leadership style. Situations whereby, for example, people are naive, people are less informed, less educated, are likely to call for simply autocratic leadership for all times and places. But situational theories would say we may have situations where people are naive, but this particular situation may call for certain leaders that the other situation may not call for. That's why we are saying situational theories dictate that specific situational variables will define specific styles of leadership. So the leadership style, the leadership approaches may be different in situation, not just to say this context, a context that looks like this will call for this type of leader. Now, behavioral theories, on the other hand, hold that great leaders are made, not born. I hope you see the difference between behavioral theories and the great man theories. Great man theories, great leaders are born. Behavioral theories, great leaders are made, not born. It's just the exact opposite when we're talking about behavioral theories. So this is actually, we sometimes say behavioral theories is actually the flip side of the great man theories. Behavioral theories, dictate that leadership is based upon the belief that great leaders are made, they are not born. It's as it were to say great leaders are trained. The focus here is on the actions of leaders and not on the mental qualities or internal states. The focus here is on the actions of the leader, not the mental qualities. You may not want to say this one has a PhD or this one has gone to school up to this level. No. Behavioral theories believe that people can learn to become leaders through teaching and observations. People can follow, can learn from other leaders and become great leaders. So the idea here is, according to behavioral theories, great leaders are made, they are not born. Now, participative theories, on the other hand, suggest that the ideal leadership style is one that takes the input of others into account, participative. theories that dictate that successful leadership must take into account the input of others. So participative theories will always be found to encourage participation and contribution of the group members. Participative theories will also help group members to feel more relevant, more committed. No, group members will feel wanted, will always feel part of the decision-making process. Remember, even when we talk about participative theories, one must always remember that a leader must retain the right to allow the input of others. Although you are a leader, participative theories dictate that a leader allows the contributions of other people. So that is what we learn from that set of theories. Now, the management, or what we popularly call as transactional theories, are more focused on the role of supervision, the role of organization, and the role of group performance. So management, you can link this to our very first 2 or 3 slides where we were distinguishing management from leadership. So here we are talking about what we would later call transactional leadership. What we can say flows from what we call management theories. So finally, we talk about what we may call relationship, or if you like, relational theories. Now, these relationship theories are the ones that are also referred to as transformational theories. They focus upon the connection formed between leaders and followers, so much so that transactional leaders, or rather leadership, motivate and inspire people. You know, transformational leaders would normally help group members to see the importance and the higher good of the task. You see, transformational leaders, in terms of crisis, in terms of challenges, will push the group members to the frontiers, to the horizons, to see the greater ideal of the institution. So that in terms when the institution looks less productive, when the benefits of the members look to be dwindling, transformational leaders are actually called upon here. They focus on the performance of the group members. So you see, transformational leaders are those who will be able to perceive the potentials within the individual members and push these individual members to the level of productivity. Now, leaders with this style will often, most of the time, have a very high ethical and moral standard on which they actually operate. Before we look at the typology of leadership models, I invite your contributions, your observations on these theories of leadership. Remember, in the next slides, we'll be looking at now how these theories produce the various types of leadership styles. Anybody would like to join us? I can see 3 hands up. Othello.
Good evening, Prof. Good evening, Dr.
Good evening to you.
Yes, I'd just like to make a few observations.
Yes.
And maybe ask questions.
Yes.
Between contingency and situational, you're speaking about when people are naive.
Yes.
That's for me, it's a bit mild when you say when people are naive and people can these leaders can come and impose themselves easily on those people. But when people are docile, I say when people are docile, there can be power grab in a situation where we are saying this is constitutional democracy, we can go to election, but there can still be power grab in the way the elections are done. And I see that when people are naive, as you are talking about there, that power grab can happen because the person grabbing power knows the population they are dealing with, they will do nothing. So they can grab power very easily in that situation. When they are courageous, also when they are aggressive to grab power, they can do that. The other thing that I would like to mention here is that a policy, a program can be, which can be constituted in the interest of the country can be brought down, and you find everything unraveling when a different leadership has come into place. For example, I'll look at the Kenya situation here, and we saw Matiang'i, and then came Magoha. These guys were streamlining and trying to strengthen the Kenyan education system. But if people are put in position because they are being rewarded for standing with somebody or for participating in election and being the person electing somebody or being in the camp of somebody, when they are put in position on that basis, you find that the program that you have put in place will come falling down, things fall apart. In a situation like that, the education system that you are trying to build can just crumble immediately, start crumbling, because you have put somebody that is incompetent in position, because this person was supporting you. If you do that, you are going to break. This is the problem we face in Africa. In many African countries suffer from this. And so we find ourselves, when you find you get a program coming up, you bring in, people have come in and they try to streamline a situation to grow a policy or to grow a country's institution. Now, when you do that, when you put a country's institution under a person that actually is not capable, the person that is incompetent, the work will be undone. The work that has been done prior will be undone. That's how I see it. So maybe we look at the situational, contextual and situational. They are very close. Situational, contingency and situation, they are very close. Where you find yourself in leadership. I'll just give an example of DR Congo. When Kabila, the late Kabila, was assassinated, his son became president immediately. This is a situation where the person finds himself, I'm not sure whether he was prepared for leadership, but then he became president because he's the son of Kabila. Thank you.
Very, very well noted. Caroline Dunge, I see your hand up. Caroline Dunge. Caroline? Caroline, we can't hear you. Maybe Sanya. Sanya could talk. We can't hear Caroline.
Yes, Dr.
Yes.
There's this narrative of servant leadership.
Yes.
Where, in what context can we put it? Is it a form of a theory, or it's some sort of a characteristic of leadership? Kindly assist.
Mm-hmm. Somebody would like to respond to that? Servant leadership.
If I may.
Yes, please, Waruku.
Actually, because what is asked is related to what I also wanted to ask. So I just want to add on to, so that when we are discussing it, it becomes now a little bit clearer. Yes. First, I must admit I've enjoyed the unpacking of the concepts. And there's one thing which then still stands out, and I'm wondering how we deal with it, is whether theory and style, when we are dealing with leadership, we are referring to the same. And in that case, whether if we, for example, have a behavioral leader, can the same leader be participative? And where do the situations, like what Sanya has asked, I wanted to ask, where are the situations of the dictatorship, the autocracy, the kakistocracy, the democracy, or servant leadership and such kind? That's what I wanted to also add there for our discussion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the input you are bringing on board, Waruku, you will see when we come to the types of leadership styles, you know, some of these will take more or less the same terminologies. For example, we'll be talking about contingency leadership, we'll be talking about managerial leadership, participative leadership, and so forth. And as you put it, you know, there are times when we can talk about things like autocratic, what also Othello was bringing up, that given the situation, this situation could be either the goals to be achieved, sometimes it could be the people being led, you know, whereby you come up with a leader who thinks that, you know, these people do not know. There are people to be led, quote unquote, people to be led, people to be told. But see, leadership in the context we are discussing it is not about this connotation of people to be led, that a leader is construed in the context of people to be led, but rather leadership understood as a position of bringing about, you know, influence to the led so that they can be able to move towards specific goals. Let's listen. Ndunge, can you hear us now, Ndunge? Could you try again? No, I think completely we can't hear Ndunge. Eugene.
Hello, hello.
Yes, we can now hear you, Karen.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask what Boaz has just asked you, and you have responded to it.
Correct. So Eugene, could you talk? We can't hear you, Eugene. We can't hear Eugene. Nyabere.
Yes, Dr.
Yes.
I hope all of you are having a good evening. I wanted to respond to what Sanya asked about servant leadership. And I would think that if we do a deeper study on transformational leadership, therein we will discover that there is what is euphemistically called servant leadership. Because a servant leader is the one who has followers. And if you look at it, you can only have followers, you can only serve people that you have a relationship with. And therefore, I think a more detailed understanding of transformational leadership will reveal to us how it is closely related to servant leadership. My 2 cents.
Right, very, very well. Nyabere, would you like to talk to us?
I already did, sir.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
you already talked to us. Josephine, I can see your hand up. No, Josephine can't hear us because we can see. Yes.
I wanted to
Yes,
answer the question where servant leadership lies. So to me, I think it lies on the situational theories, because you're looking at the specific variable which define that type of leader. He's a servant to the people.
All right. So I think let's make now progress. Let's make some progress. So having looked at these theories, I indicated that next we would like to look at now the typologies, the typologies of leadership, what we would call the types of leadership models. So you notice here, I'm talking now specifically about, you know, these types of educational leadership. Again, my source you can see there. Now, there are various types. Now, this that I put across, they are not the only types of leadership. They are not the only models of educational leadership, but perhaps the most exercised. So we want to look at these various models, you know, one by one. We try to see one by one and to see what actually they stand for. So we begin with the first one, which, so you can see institutional leadership, transformational leadership, moral leadership, transactional, or what we sometimes call political leadership, participative leadership, managerial leadership, and contingency leadership. We look at those 7 in summary. Now, when we talk about instructional leadership, the word is instructional. You see now in the educational sector, when you hear the term instructional, you know, something comes to your mind. So instructional leadership is centered around the promotion of effective teaching and learning. So you can see this one very much appropriated to an educational institution, but you can always appropriate it to other situations. So you can see when we're talking about instructional leadership, we are asking ourselves, what do we perceive to be the core business of this organization? What do we perceive to be the core business? So you see, instructional leadership focuses on the school's core business, which is founded in managing teaching, learning, and the pupils' progress plus their achievements. So those become the focus of instructional leadership. So here we understand leadership as an influence that is targeted at creating that condition, those conditions that will be supportive to teachers and the students to achieve learning. So instructional leadership is about the leadership within that school, within that educational setting, that will ensure that the core business. So you can as well carry that concept to other organizational structures. The idea here is to focus on the core business of an institution. What is it? So you see, the focus is to create and support an enabling environment for the core business of the organization to take place. So the strategies to be used here will include things like modeling, you know, the what to do. A teacher will model, not a teacher rather, a leader would model, would monitor what is happening, what the teachers are doing in the classrooms, what the learners are doing during prep time and so forth. Another strategy would be professional dialogue and discussion, whereby you discuss with the teachers. If it was in a bank, if it was in a given organization, discuss with the members of the organization. You know, have a dialogue with them. Model what you like be done. And you can see, you know, we don't look for these things too far, dear friends. You are taking your degree, your higher degree, in a university whereby generally you find, you know, people who call themselves or people whom we give a title VCs. Don't go to classrooms to teach, but look, you are taking your higher degree in a university where the vice chancellor is teaching more than us. You know, he's not just teaching you one course, he's teaching more than us. That is what we are talking about, modeling. You know, doing it so that others can follow. You know, we've had to have meetings. You know, we have these classes, and after a given time, we who kind of facilitate your learning, we come together with the vice chancellors in-house and we discuss what do we think is the happenings here, monitoring what is happening. We have professional dialogue and discussions about what is happening. All this geared towards achieving or actualizing the core business of learning, of a school, of an educational institution. Now, despite this, you know, there are also some the instructional leadership model. For example, there are those who feel that this kind of model underestimates other aspects of school life. You know, this model is the kind of model which sometimes you'll hear some principals saying that in this school, we will not be participating in ball games, will not be participating in co-curricular activities. Why? We want to focus on teaching and learning. So very many aspects of school life are likely to be ignored under this model of leadership. We are saying they're likely, not that they will always be ignored. So you notice that we are talking about really this kind of leadership model, which we also observe that it is the most neglected in our educational institution. And the moment you neglect or ignore this form of leadership, what we are calling instructional leadership, this will very much often lead to the collapse of the culture of teaching and learning in our education institutions. For example, just to bring this one to the fore, there are many of our educational institutions, be they primary schools, be they secondary schools, be they even universities, whereby you see, like the results the other day, it came out, for class 8, the last class 8 exams. And you hear, the cry is not so much that this person received these marks or whatever. The cry is, why have they failed? So the understanding is that exams are done to be passed, not that exams are done as evaluations. But you see, the moment school leadership, the moment school leaders say in the name of principals, head teachers, in the name of heads of departments, in the name of class teachers, the moment they ignore instructional leadership, this one normally, most of the time, normally would lead to the collapse of a culture of teaching and the learning in those institutions. So you now meet institutions whereby when you ask students to come to online classes, like there is a group of students I'm teaching on online, and that class is not like this one. The other day I realized that although I see them, they have signed in, but nobody is normally in class. So when you ask, can somebody respond to this? First of all, no hand is raised up. When you ask out of volition, can somebody attend to this? You discover nobody is responding because nobody is there. You are actually speaking to gadgets alone. That's what we're talking about. The collapse of teaching and learning. But you see, in such circumstances, just to pull this argument to its logical end, you will find in circumstances where there is no genuine teaching and learning, when it comes to evaluation, people will get concerned. Why is so and so passing? Not really passing, failing. For example, we have universities where you will be asked, why has so and so done a supplementary and they failed again? As if exams are, I think you understand. The moment instructional leadership collapses in our educational institutions, the culture of teaching and learning collapses. So we wish to make this observation here that, quoting Thulo 2003, we wish to make this citation that giving a prominent place to leadership, especially for learning within principals training and development programs, would actually make a valuable contribution to the restoration of an appropriate culture of teaching and learning, and to the development of schools as learning organizations. So instructional leadership is about a concentrated focus to teaching and learning and the pupils' progress and achievement as the definition of the core business of our educational institutions. We look at the second type of leadership, which we call the transformational leadership, the transformational leadership. And in transformational leadership, we note that the focus here is on the commitment of colleagues. The leader who is a transformational leader focuses on the commitment of colleagues. He focuses on leading change and improving performance. So the idea here is to focus on what is the commitment of the colleagues, of the people working within this organization. So transformational leadership would be about how to awaken that commitment in organizational members. Transformational leadership assumes that the central focus of leadership ought to be the commitments and the capacity of organizational members. That ought to be the most critical thing within an organization. So here we find that higher levels of personal commitment to organizational goals and greater capacities of accomplishing those goals are normally assumed to be the result of this extra effort, So there are various dimensions that define this transformational leadership. You can see, for example, transformational leaders will act by building school visions. You will be told what is the vision of the school. So these are things you find at a given time. A few years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was this move whereby every school was asked, develop a vision, develop a mission. That's why you move to those schools and you find some have written their vision, their mission by the gate there. So transformational leadership is about building institutional vision, establishing school goals. What are the goals? What are the goals of this school? What ought to be the goal? What ought to be the vision, the mission of the school? Transformational leadership is about providing intellectual stimulation within the organization. So transformational leadership is not just about the social influence, but really the intellectual stimulation. It is about offering individualized support. Individualized support here means you now move out to this specific individual, to this specific teacher. You've said in that school that we'll be doing online classes, but some of your teachers do not have the technical know-how, do not have the disposition to do online classes. What do you do? Transformational leadership is not about saying how many of the teachers can do online classes and how many cannot do. Therefore, those who cannot do are many. Therefore, let us shelve it. Transformational leadership is about how do we provide individualized support to those who are unable to do what we want done. Transformational leadership also brings in an element that we saw in the previous type, an element of modeling the best practices and the important organizational values. Modeling means a transformational leader must live those values, must live those practices, so that a transformational leader will not just sit in the office and give directives. That would be more of management. A transformational leader is the one who will move around and do some of those things that he wants. That's why we talk about modeling the best practices. So we expect a transformational principle being able to do schemes of work, being able to do lesson plans, being able to go to class and teach. Once that principle does it that way, others will follow. Transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is about demonstrating high performance expectations. So you as a transformational leader, a transformational CEO, a transformational principal, a transformational head of department or a class teacher, you are about demonstrating the high performance expectations. If you expect any high performance from the teachers who work besides you, from the learners in your school, transformational leadership calls for, or rather summons you to demonstrate the high performance expectation that you expect from others. It is about creating a productive school culture, and is also about developing structures that will foster participation in school decision-making processes. So you can see what transformational leadership can be able to do for what one would call, quote unquote, a dying institution. That when you are talking about this institution is more or less dying, this is what transformational leadership can do. Therefore, transformational leadership is actually essential for the successful transition of a school into what we can refer to as a self-managing if you like, an autonomous system. Transformational leadership is actually a normative approach to school leadership. Normative in the sense that transformational leadership is about what a school ought to be. You see, transformational leadership is about a leader conceiving in his or her mind, what should the school, the ideal school, we are talking not just about this particular school, but what should an ideal school be like? So once you conceive it that way, then you struggle to bring that reality into practice. That's why we're saying transformational leadership is a normative approach. Normative means it's about the ought of a school, what a school ought to be, not what schools are like, but what schools ought to be. Once more again, there is quite a myriad of criticisms against the transformational leadership. These criticisms should reveal the shortcomings, which in the last analysis we'll be able to say we need eclecticism in leadership, borrowing from various forms of leadership. So one of the criticisms of transformational leadership is that transformational leadership is actually leader-centered. It is about, rather it focuses on the leader influencing school outcomes rather than the nature or the direction of those outcomes. Transformational leadership more or less favors the leader's interests. So here, it may not be about what others think or really what the organization, even as we say organization ought to be, but it is about what I as a leader conceive to be the normativity, conceive to be the ought position of this institution. So that's why we're saying that it is about the leader's interest. So once the leader conceives this school, conceives the organization to be like this, transformational leadership means he will do all that is possible towards that end. That's why we talk about, given the heroic, given the charismatic features of leadership, given whatever the potential in that leadership, the criticism is transformational leadership can easily turn into despotic kind of leadership and even undermine democratic or institutional organization. This is what we are trying to say, and we said it earlier, that in circumstances whereby a transformational leader goes to a school as a principal, goes to a given branch as a bank manager, and has all these ideas, and imagine that nobody in that organization knows these ideas or can understand this thing, no, that transformational leader can easily undermine really democratic institutional organization and just push his or her own agenda. On the overall, we are saying transformational leadership approach has the potential to engage all stakeholders if you chose to in the achievement and of whatever, of the educational objectives of that school. So you can see again what transformational leadership is about. We talk about moral leadership. And here, moral leadership emphasizes the importance of values, importance of vision, importance of ethical leadership. That's the core of moral leadership. So the assumptions here are such that the critical focus of leadership ought to be on the values, on the beliefs, and of ethics of the leaders themselves. So moral leadership is about, the values that this leader stands for. Not just his ideas in terms of, this is the intellectual understanding I have of this university or of this school. But moral leadership is about the values, the beliefs, the ethical norms that this leader has. So moral leadership emphasizes that a leader must be moral. Another assumption is that moral leadership assumes that authority and influence are to be derived from defensible conceptions of what is right. So the idea here is we must be able to explain, regardless of what people think, what is right, objective, not what is right according to me, what is right objectively, so that with due respect to our inclinations, the idea here is when we are talking about, for example, LGBTQ rights, if somebody was to argue, we must really bring in people in schools to instruct learners on LGBTQ rights and so forth. You see, a moral leadership is about asking, is this right and good for these young ones? So that the moment you reflect over it on the moral basis, remember we have said, moral leadership believes that a leader must be moral. So the moment you reflect on this and say, this is not right, then moral leadership will lead you to say, I will not accept this in the school that I'm in, as it were. The other assumption is that, every successful education institution, moral leadership believes, ought to have a moral base, if you like, a moral compass. And this moral compass needs to be composed of given values, beliefs, and so forth that are seen to be sacred, if you like, that are seen to be things that cannot be questioned. And these values, these beliefs, which we are terming as a moral compass, define and describe the moral life of that institution. So this moral compass, as it were, moral leadership believes must be administered really as a moral craft. Really, a school, leadership in those institutions is about moral craft, developing, moral beliefs, developing moral values, as it were. Two features of moral leadership are that moral leadership is spiritual in nature, as it relates to the recognition that many leaders possess what might be called higher order perspectives. Another feature of the moral leadership is that moral leadership has something to do with the moral confidence. In other words, moral leadership must develop moral confidence in the subjects. So this is the capacity to act in a way that is consistent with the ethical system, that is consistent over time. Just Orlando, give us time, we move, and then we'll get back to this, to another series here. We look at the transactional, or what we call political leadership. Transactional, or what we call political leadership. Remember that by nature, leadership has an element of being political or being transactional. Leadership is about settling the conflicts of interest between stakeholders. This is the place that transactional leadership finds itself in, or rather, this is the point at which transactional form of leadership enters the broad spectrum of leadership. So a transactional leader, call him a principal, relates with the teachers based on an exchange of some short-lived or valued resources. So transactional leadership, if you like, away from the words of this slide, is about, I give this so that the teachers can do this. It's transactional, it's political, if you like. That's why we call it political. It's kind of, leadership is based on some form of transaction. This is why you hear in those schools, these things you hear of, what do they call it? Motivation of teachers. Dear colleagues, I call you colleagues here, dear colleagues, some of the things, were you to reflect on them deeply and put some of these leadership concepts together, you would be disturbed. And teachers in the house, please forgive me for what I'm going to say, because it might sound a little bit tough. There are things in schools, in our education institutions, call them primary schools, secondary schools, and so forth, that we have practiced over time, that when you look at those things, they're essentially, forgive my language, please, they're essentially evil, for lack of good words. They're essentially evil. But we've practiced them over a time that by now, we look at those things to be very normal. Some of these things include, learners go to class, teachers are paid by government, if you like, not in fact by government. Teachers are paid by taxpayers, but they tell you that, for me to help the children pass exams, whatever the language is used, the headmaster, the principal, addresses the board of management, BOM members, addresses the parents meeting and tells them each parent needs to contribute this amount of money. Addresses the board of management and asks the board of management that the board must set aside several hundreds of thousands to go where? For motivation. Look at the reasons why in those primary schools, children will come to school on Saturday or Sunday, whatever it is, and the parents are asked, contribute money. And all this is in the name of motivation. Before I invite some of you to react to this, some of the questions I've asked myself, and I want you to join me in these questions, and I know maybe I'm talking to a very delicate audience because many of you are teachers, is that, what happens from Monday to Friday in that primary day school, in that primary public day school? What is this thing that happens from Monday morning to Friday evening that you find something learning or teaching cannot be done effectively at that time? It must be done on Saturday. It must be done on Sunday. Look at, the question turned around is that, what is this thing that must be done on Saturday and Sunday? What is this thing that must be done after 4 p.m. on weekdays that cannot be done in the normal learning hours of the school? If you like it, we are posing a question for those who are teachers in class, in the room. Is it possible on the basis of the professional documents whereby we're talking about the syllabus, that is the curriculum designs, that are turned into schemes of work, which are ultimately turned into lesson plans and checked against record of work covered? Is it possible to demonstrate that on the basis of schemes of work and lesson plans, we can account for those lessons on Saturday and Sunday? Is it possible to demonstrate that whenever a teacher goes to class on Saturday or after 4 p.m., he can be able to show that this is the lesson strand within the scheme of work that I was going to teach, that I did not have time to teach during the normal class time? So that under transactional leadership, the principal must be forced, or the board of management must be forced to enter into a form of transaction. I'm repeating those terminologies so that I can rub them in. A principal must enter into a form of a transaction with the teachers that is based on an exchange for short-lived and valued resources or interests. This short-lived or valued resources or interests could include the school's mean score, a short-lived and valued interest. So that transactional leadership finally is actually presented as a form of an established political exchange process, if you like, a form of a political exchange strategy for members of an organization. Transactional leadership presents itself as, a form of leadership that unites the principal's authority, the leader's authority position, with the need for cooperation of teachers so as to secure specific goals. That an exchange may actually secure benefits for both parties. This is the conception. And remember, sometimes these benefits, like we are looking at it in the school context, may sometimes have nothing to do with the learner's progress or learner's, learners' effective learning, as we saw in the instructional leadership. But it's simply the teachers need a mean score in order to be promoted. The principal needs a mean score so that he can become a chief principal and so forth. Please, my students, what is your take on these discussions? What is your take on this discussion? Florence.
Thank you, Mwalimu. I happen to be the deputy chair for a board of management in Nairobi Public High School. And I also happen to be a parent. I was now a PTA chair in a private school where my son was. And Jimmy Sanya has written down there in the chat corruption. And that is what I witnessed in both schools. So in the public school, the teacher would say, I didn't have time to finish my, especially maths and science.
Did we lose you, Macho?
She has disappeared.
Yeah,
Yes,
we've
it
lost
seems
Macho.
like she got lost.
Yeah, we lost her. Maybe as we wait for her, Nyawita, as we wait for Macho. Nyawita? A name Nyawita? Again, Nyawita seemed not to be with us. Brenda Akinyi, we could listen to you. Brenda?
Florence is asking whether we can hear her.
Brenda?
Yes, Brenda?
Yeah, so I think we can look at it from different dimensions, but it's not fair to call it remedial. And then at the same time, I believe if it's remedial, then the teachers want to maybe assist those learners who have learning problems or difficulties in learning, but it's not supposed to be pegged on a certain amount of money, because children who are not able, parents are not able to pay this kind of money to get extra help, then they become disadvantaged. So I would actually assume that maybe it be painted, given a different name. That is not, I don't know, remedial money or whatever name it's given. Whenever, and it's not also supposed to be compulsory, and it's supposed to be on need-to-need basis, rather than it being a collective responsibility for every parent to give a given amount of money for their children to be able to be given the services that they deserve. Thank you.
I hear you, Brenda. I hear you, Brenda. And before I invite Faith and Suki to talk, I'm just inviting you people to think of it. We are now really reflecting on this educational leadership very squarely. Think of a situation where patients were in hospital, maybe admitted in wards. And I hear nowadays this idea of motivation has crossed over to the hospital, whereby even then, relatives of patients and would say, so that I be checking on your patient through the night, so that I be doing this, doing the nursing
even
activity.
Up to the morgue, Daktari.
Yes.
Even up to the morgue.
Exactly. That you need to give me something, whatever it is. The way you put it really you know, there are times when my father passed on and is in the morgue, and, you know, people are telling you, so that we can do this, you know, give us something and so forth, so that we can prepare the body this way. We can see the collapse of professionalism. Faith Nzuki, talk to us.
Okay, my second, I don't know the name that you can give to this kind of topic.
We have difficulties in hearing you, Faith.
What? You can hear me now?
No, there's really fluctuating on off. It could be your network.
It's in my network, but I seem to be, I can hear everybody, but you can't hear me.
All right. Am I the only one having it difficult to hear, Faith?
It's breaking.
It's breaking. That's the word. It's actually breaking. But Faith, you struggle. If we can't hear you totally, we'll indicate.
Okay.
Struggle to talk to us.
Okay. I would say that I don't know.
No, I think totally we can't hear Faith. Ingosi Ruth, talk to us. Ingosi, talk to us. No, we can't hear.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you well, Ingosi.
Yes. So I've seen on the chat, I'm a teacher, and in our school, we wake up in the morning at 6:30 to go to school for remedial.
Yes.
When we get there, during normal classes, we still go early in the morning.
Yes.
To teach the students. So according to me, it's just motivation for the teacher. It's not a bribery. It's not a transactional kind of leadership or payment or anything. I feel aggravated when someone says it's transactional, because as a teacher, if I wake up at 6:30 and I have my son in the house and I leave him in the house, I cannot prepare him because I have to go and teach the students. It is only motivation, and they don't even pay a lot. And that is why we say teaching is falling. So I'm feeling aggravated when someone says that we are being paid this money, so it's instructional. It is just motivation to say thank you for everything I do. Waking up at 6:30 and leaving my child in school, it is not. So when I see other people saying that we are greedy and yet we are teaching their children,
Ingosi, I hear you.
What about in the morgue?
Ingosi, let me comment. Let me
Daktari.
comment on Ingosi. Let me comment
Daktari.
on Ingosi.
Yes, Prof, comment.
Ingosi is still on the floor. Ingosi, you are still on floor?
No, I'm waiting for you to
she has
comment.
finished.
Daktari wanted to ask.
I also wanted to ask something.
No, let's wait. Let's have an order the way. Let's have perhaps Jen. Jen, is Jen's hand up? Jen
Yes.
Amisi.
Yes, my hand is up. I am also a teacher, and I am feeling we are being demonized.
Yes.
Yet some of us genuinely go very early. I for one, I'm always, let's consider a situation where one is teaching in a boarding school.
Yes.
And the current situation is not all schools can actually accommodate teaching staff in the compound, or there are those of us who prefer to stay out for our own reasons. So sometimes we make that early morning sacrifice to go and conduct a serious remedial class. I teach maths. Somebody mentioned, especially in maths and sciences, let's agree, let's be sincere. These are the subjects where students find challenges. And you find that they will look for you that early morning. So by you going there and being in class from 6:30 and probably until 7:45 when the other lessons start, I don't think you're being greedy. I don't think you're being, is it greedy, hungry, selfish, or whatever? All those terminologies that are being used. Let's please not demonize. There are those of us who do it genuinely.
Good.
All in the sense that you want to help these achievers, these learners. There's a point you want to move them to. After all, the government lessons, if we go by what the government pays us, because somebody says we are paid, yes, we are paid to teach from 8 to 5. So what do you do with that son or daughter of yours who is getting ease because you're just operating by the 40 minutes and I'm out of class. 40 minutes and I'm out of class. So there are areas where it is actually being genuinely done. Let's not mix up where I saw somebody saying, in fact, teachers don't even attend to their lessons. No. Let's not demonize everybody. Yes, there's that category of teacher who does that, but it is not all of us who behave like that.
Thank you, Miss.
Osanya,
Thank you.
Osanya, Osanya. I would like to hear
Sasa,
Osanya.
I hear your
Osanya.
passion.
Osanya.
Yes, Daktari.
Yes, I would like to hear Osanya. Yes.
Thank you for this discussion.
Yes.
You're getting me.
I'm getting you. I'm getting you.
I don't know where to start.
Start where
I'm
you
a
are,
DOS.
Osanya.
And
Did
I'm
I
a
lose
DOS of a
Osanya?
school.
Yes, Osanya.
And when the current crop of teachers, you can't get results unless you commit them in school.
Now, Osanya,
And one, yes,
Osanya,
yes,
I would like you to hold
yes.
at that point, and then I'm going to give you a chance to go on. Has somebody heard Osanya? I wish Osanya would have been able to repeat what he has said, but in case he's not able, I will repeat for him. The current crop of teachers. How did you finish it, Osanya?
Must be kept in school.
Continue.
And therefore, you must have some incentives.
Correct.
To put them there. That's why this money, however terms we are going to use them, why are we not taking our children to schools that are not asking for extra levies?
Good.
But all of us are going to schools where, apart from paying school fees, you're also paying some other money. Let's be very genuine about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And look at schools where we are paying remedial money versus school that no remedial money is being paid versus performance.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, Daktari, you have indicated that we can actually teach within the given time the ministry wants us to do.
Yes.
But we have also said this evening that people don't believe that exams are done to be failed. Exams are done to be passed.
Yes.
Because of that pressure, schools are coming up with strategies of completing syllabus less than the time the ministry stipulates.
Yes.
Like in our school, we must clear syllabus by February. For us to have a good time for students to conceptualize and be ready for exams. I'm looking at by you. Let's teach from 8 to 4, and the syllabus ends in November, and exams start in December. Shall we get results? And on that note, I welcome CBC, where it's not exam oriented and the people are not looking at success because of how you have performed in your exam. That is my take this evening, Doctor.
Yeah, you see, Osanya, let me take it up from there and then we move a bit. You know, what we are discussing, in fact, I like, Osanya, the way you've looked at it. You know, what, Osanya, you've guided us to discuss in your contribution is very critical. You know, you begin off by telling us that, you know, the nature of schooling today, there are certain things that may not happen if certain things are not done. Get that language. There are certain things that may not be realized if certain things are done. And here, you know, friends, I want you to bear in your mind one thing, that the person talking to you in the name of Kegode is fundamentally a trained teacher. A trained teacher with the teaching subjects, trained to teach in a school before, you know, further studies come in. Therefore, when I throw stones, remember, or a fire, call it a friendly fire, because we are actually interrogating ourselves. And depending on us who are here, depending on their ages and the like, you know, sometimes I think about the glorious moments of education in this country. The days when I went to school, in primary school, and in class 1, what you'd call grade 1 today, whatever it is, in my days, you know, nursery schooling was not compulsory. It was optional. You could choose to go to nursery or choose to go to standard 1 or right away. I was among those who was sent to school to standard 1 by a grandmother who did not know how to write, read and write and so forth. And in that primary school in class 1, we used to have 2 books. These 2 books were essentially 32-page exercise book that is cut in, I think you people, some of you understand what I'm struggling to describe. Cut in the middle, 32 pages. So one exercise book of 32 pages is bought, and then it is cut into 2. And the understanding is you have 2 books. And, we would carry them, we tuck in our shirt and we throw it, inside the shirt, tucked in shirt. Yeah. And, this book, we were never given assignments to take home. Learning was for school. We go to class to learn. The teacher teaches, we write there and whatever it is. One more feature about this exercise book, this one exercise book, which is half of 32 pages, you wrote in about 3 subjects, one from the front to the middle, one from the middle coming to the front, one from the middle going to the back, another one from the back coming to the middle. And you are not able to fill this one exercise book in a term. You cannot fill one. It's a very big book, 32 pages cut into 2. You don't take assignment home. But you see, you can look around and see what that kind of education produced. You see, when Osanya was talking to us, the idea is not hitting at the teacher. The idea is to ask ourselves, is it possible that our professions, not only teaching profession, look at even the security profession, and I'm sure with this one, Wekesa is around. Wekesa, you are hearing us. Look at the security docket. You go there, you have an issue, whatever it is. Policeman say, OCPD says, for us to attend to this, give us 2,000. Look, we go to the courts, the clerks of the court. For your file to be found, or land registry, for your file to be found. I'm not going to choose those words that people have used here, they have used in the chat. Normally, I don't have a chance to read the chat, sorry for that. But all I'm trying to say, were you to look at these issues that we are talking about in what we are calling transactional leadership, and look at it vis-a-vis moral leadership, could these elements be talking to us? We are not saying that there is transactional leadership in schools. Grant that we can be able to say we don't know what type of leadership is in the school, but at least we can be able to firmly say, is there an indication that we are deviating from the lofty professional moral requirements in our fields? Now, if these things continue, if they enter our classrooms, if they enter our hospitals, if they enter our roads, the question is to be able to see where does society head to. For me, that is fundamental. For me, it is not the issue of whether a doctor is being attacked or whether, the question is, are we convinced we are doing the right thing at the right time, in the right manner that that thing ought to be done? The criticism here is that transactional leadership may not engage staff, may not engage teachers beyond the immediate gains arising from the transaction. So that if the focus is a mean score, then moral issues could collapse. That's why sometimes you'd hear, how does the principal behave in a school when the best mathematics teacher in the county is actually the teacher in your school who always produces, over 100 A's in mathematics? How does the principal behave when he hears that the same teacher is being accused of what we call carnal knowledge in the profession. You know, how do we look at the teacher struggling to talk to the learner, struggling to talk to the parents, because his best teacher, what describes a best teacher? An immediate gain that arises from the transaction. Criticism number 2, transactional leadership does not produce long-term commitment to the values and the vision being promoted by school leaders. This is just the flip side of the first criticism. That's why I'm asking you to consider sometimes the conflicts between parents and educators. So the idea is not to say parents are on the right, the principal is on the right, the teachers are on the right. I think our critical discussion on transactional leadership is to invite us to situate the place of professionalism in what actually we are doing. That for me, that is more basic. The next form of leadership is what we are calling participative leadership. This is a kind of leadership that emphasizes on the importance of including colleagues, the importance of shared decision-making in an organization, the importance of investing in social capital. Did I hear a voice?
Yes. Can I just make a small contribution regarding the previous slide before we move on?
Yes, Othello. Othello, you may move and do so.
Okay. My colleagues were talking about, they were very passionate about what we're talking. Maybe different people are seeing in different light. But for me, I think if it is contractual, I have no issue with that. Maybe I will draw my comment of mild bribery and things like that. When colleagues were talking about remedial, I was thinking of something that is initiated by the teacher in order for them to benefit. But if it's something that is contractual between those who are in authority and the teachers, then there is no problem. In corporate organizations, many corporate bodies pay people over time. If, for example, you work over and above your normal working hours, you will be paid twice as your normal rate for each hour of extra hours you put into your work. For example, if you work late, if you are supposed to leave at 5 and you're leaving at 7 or even 7:30 at night, they will pay double each of the hours that you work overtime. So for remedial, if it's something that is contractual between those in authority and the teachers, then there's no issue with that. For me, that's personally, I think I have no issue with that. I was thinking that when they talk about remedial, it's something that is initiated by teachers to gain extra money.
Yeah,
thank you.
I hope it is as you put it, Othello. That's all I can comment on that. So let's focus on
I've changed my speaker, Daktari.
Yes.
I can be heard now. I've changed my speaker.
I can hear you. I can hear you very clearly now.
Okay. I want to talk about what Othello has just talked about. If it is something initiated, this is where the leadership now comes in, because teachers, it usually starts as something which is just a motivation, but then it turns out to be that bad thing, the secret thing that is done there. You find that a teacher during the class time, you go over the school and you find that students are by themselves. I've given a discussion question, I've done this and I've done this. But during the remedial time, you'll find that every teacher is there, because if you're not there, then you'll not be paid. So that we paint it in the correct way, I think the leadership style, we are talking about the transactional leadership. The head of institution should make clear instructions and instruct how it should be done, so that it doesn't fall out to be something like a bribe. Because if somebody sits down during the class time and during the remedial times, it's very busy in the class, then it means there's something that is following during that time, which is not even in the correct way. Thank you, Daktari.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Suki. We've had you very clear. Let's make some progress. So we're talking about participative leadership. And we've given that introduction that participative leadership stresses on the importance of including colleagues, you know, the importance of shared decision-making and the importance of social capital, you know, investing in people. Social capital to mean participative leadership emphasizes on the importance of investing in people, social capital. So this form of leadership focuses on decision-making processes as the most important feature of organizational leadership. Therefore, participative leadership is generally based on the assumption that participation will lead to an increased school effectiveness, and that participation is consistent with the democratic forms of life or democratic principles and values. So you see, participative leadership is now an invitation for people to participate, is an invitation, is a belief that there lies a potential in people. People have ideas. You are investing in social capital. You know, social capital, the way people will say, I contribute for you, you know, and we contribute to one another. When it comes to my time, they'll contribute for me, you know, social capital. So you see, furthermore, participative leadership is about the bonds, the bonds that actually staff make together. So in participative leadership, we are saying staff members are actually bonded together, and really, it eases pressure within an institution, where really those who are heading those institutions, those who are in leadership position, are able to share roles. So that is really the essence of participative leadership and the value in participative leadership. It binds the staff together, and really, they are able to work together. And those who are in leadership position, they are no longer simply the ones carrying the stress of doing it, but rather the roles are distributed. Participative leadership will be seen in the context of building relationships in education. Thulo would say, building relationships in education, relationships in that school. So within that staff meeting, the headmaster is really promoting the building of relationship. We want things done, building of relationships. How do we ensure that members of a given department within that organization do not just look at the great man kind of idea in the CEO, but they have the immediate boss who is seen as a facilitator? So participative leadership is about the leader building relationship within an organization. So this form of leadership really fosters cooperation between the various stakeholders within really an organization. Towards the end, we talk about managerial leadership. As we talk about managerial leadership, I invite you to reflect on what we said about management and how we distinguished it from pure leadership. So the importance of defining functions, defining tasks, and defining behaviors. So managerial leadership is by nature really based on the assumption that leadership ought to focus on functions. Leadership ought to focus on behavior. In its own nature, it is hierarchical, it is bureaucratic, and it is authoritarian in nature. Remember the elements of what management is as opposed to leadership. We are putting these two concepts together, but emphasizing management. That's why we're calling it managerial leadership. It is hierarchical, it is bureaucratic, it is authoritarian. You see, as we've said before, it assumes that the behavior of organizational member is largely rational, and therefore the authority and influence are allocated to formal positions, as it were. You notice It prioritizes the efficient implementation. Managerial leadership is about, for example, in that school, you are a teacher there, you are a classroom teacher, you are a principal in that teacher. Managerial leadership is about the county director of education has said this, therefore we must do it. You know, hierarchical, you know, bureaucratic, authoritarian. Managerial leadership does not open the ground for dialogue. You get those concepts: hierarchical, bureaucratic, authoritarian. As Caldwell, 1992, would put it, he identifies what he calls 7 cyclical managerial functions, which include really goal setting. Managerial leadership is about goal setting, is about the needs identification. A managerial leader identifies the needs of an organization. Is about priority setting, is about planning, budgeting, implementing, and evaluating. Why does Caldwell 1992 call it cyclical managerial functions? Is because, as we saw in policy formulation, the moment you reach number 7, evaluating, you set again the agenda. Remember what we said about public policy. You set again the agenda. And as I've said, managerial leadership is about, you know, the higher body has said it must be done. So you notice managerial leadership frowns at things that will look like, you know, dialogue, things that will look like democratic governance. Instead, managerial leadership, you know, emphasizes on hierarchy, emphasizes on bureaucracy. Who has said this? The memo has come from who? Emphasizes on authoritarianism, that authority has said. So you'll notice a head of department, humanities in a school, telling the members of the department, the head teacher has said that the deputy county or the sub-county director of education has said that the county director of education has said that the regional county director of education has said that such and such a thing is done. So you can see the hierarchy, you can see the bureaucracy, and you can understand why it is authoritarian. So managerial leadership is not focused at all on the concept of vision. Managerial leadership has nothing to do with the vision. No, does not reflect on the concept of a vision. It is not concerned about the better future of an institution. If you are a manager of a bank or a company, your concern, if you are a managerial leader, your concern is not about the future of the branch that you are a manager to. Your concern is about what has the head office said, and that's all you do. So managerial leadership is not at all concerned with the vision of an organization, but it is concerned really, or really focuses on managing the existing activities successfully as bureaucratically really communicated. We now look at what we call contingency leadership as the last form of leadership that I'm putting across we look at. So contingency leadership here generally highlights how leaders respond to particular organizational circumstances and challenges that they face really in the day-to-day encounters. So contingency leadership, remember the contingency theories, implies that leadership is contingent on context. This I've already explained, I don't need to belabor it. Leadership is contingent. The word contingent would mean leadership is dependent on context. That is, context determine the type of leadership that we are going to have. So contingency leadership recognizes the diverse nature of school context. It recognizes the advantages of adopting leadership styles to particular, contexts in those schools. And, contingency leadership would be able to argue that we cannot simply say one form of leadership is good enough for all schools or such like a thing. So this approach, you notice, assumes that what is important is how lead respond to unique organizational circumstances within a given school. So this contingent leadership, we are saying, is actually a reflexive approach to leadership, reflexive in the manner that you reflect on the circumstances that are in the organization. You reflect on organizational circumstances and the problems, and the model a leadership approach or a leadership style that will respond to that. So you notice we are finally saying here that contingent leadership does not rely on standardized leadership models and so forth. So these are the types of really leadership that I thought we need to look at. We want to move very close to the end and just run through what we would call qualities of educational leadership, if you like, qualities of good educational leadership. And this is why I said that I wish the successful educational leader was here just to talk to us about these qualities and so forth.
Successful leader was here.
I don't know. There seems to be somebody there. Yeah, I've muted, correct. So on this slide, I've just said that I wished the successful educational leader was here to talk to us. However, in his absence, we say this. You know, successful educational leadership, you know, can only be thought of to be second only to classroom teaching in terms of its influence to student learning. That if you want to consider student learning as really the climax of school leadership, the climax of organizational leadership, put differently for those who are not teachers, we are saying, once you recognize, you know, what we want to call the core business of your institution, of your organization, then we are saying, you know, successful organizational leadership can only be thought of to be second to that core business. In fact, it is the driver of that core business. That's why we are saying the greatest impact of successful educational leadership, you know, will be located in those schools where learning needs are most significant. You know, where learning needs are most required. In those institutions, you will highly appreciate the import of good educational leadership. Therefore, we're saying the role of school leadership in our circumstance continue to be increasingly complex and demanding. Therefore, we need to reflect on what ought to be some of the best skills, some of the best attributes that can define for us qualities of good, successful educational leadership. So in this slide, I mentioned just a few. For example, I mentioned what I call key characteristics of successful educational leadership: being open-minded, ready to learn from others, flexible. These concepts, I don't need to explain them any further. They are very clear. You know, a good leader, a good institution, organizational, educational leader need to be open-minded. You understand that. Need to be ready to learn from others. This is a 21st century skill where we talk about learning to unlearn, you know, learning to unlearn so that you can learn. We're talking about a key characteristic of flexibility. A good, successful leader must be flexible, not a straitjacket kind of fixated kind of leader. Must have strong values, you know, must have strong values and a high expectation of others, really. showing regard to other people. And then finally, we are saying must be emotionally resilient and optimistic. However, when leaders find themselves in challenging circumstances, you are put in a school where results are wanting. You are put in schools, a school that is collapsing. You are posted to a school where parents have just demonstrated against the outgoing principal. You are put, a CEO of a bank, of a branch, where people are leaving, are closing their accounts. In such circumstances, you need even more focused qualities of leadership. That's why we put some of this here and we say passion and risk-taking. Such a leader who finds himself in such circumstances, not just to be open-minded, ready to learn, flexible, and have strong values and so forth, but such a leader must demonstrate a passion, for what he's doing, must demonstrate, a zeal to take risk. Such a leader must demonstrate high personal humility, high emotional intelligence, tenacity, and resilience in advocacy. Such a leader, we know all leaders should, but such a leader who finds himself in such circumstances must demonstrate the highest respect for others, personal conviction, and a strong sense for what we call really moral responsibility and commitment to the core business of the organization. So these are some of the elements that we believe should punctuate, quality educational and institutional leadership, as it were. Moving on towards the end, we want to say that basic leadership practices, what now somebody practically can be found to do to be defined as a successful educational leader. I don't know whether these things really correctly defines what our VC, Vice Chancellor, is. That's why I thought really he could be the best one to talk about this. We are saying here that successful heads, successful leaders improve pupils' outcome, improve the institutional output through not just what they do, but through what they are, whom they are. Successful leaders work through their values, through their virtues, through their disposition, through their attribute, through their competence. If you like, they operate through what they believe in, as well as what they do. So besides what they do, there is what their convictions are. Now, among the practices that they do, we recognize that these practices are an essential link to basic characteristics of successful leadership. They include things like building relationships outside school community. Dear friends, I'm careful here, but at the beginning of this class, somebody asked me, the very first question I was asked, how is Moi? And so forth. And that was the question I was asked. If you've been listening to the stories, you will hear between the stories that when he was here, he came for village harambes. When he was here, he came for matangas. When we were here, he came for funerals. When he was here, he walked around. Don't ask me many questions. Are you hearing me when I talk about building relationships outside the school community? Is somebody understanding what I'm saying? Because I cannot put it in any simpler words. Is somebody understanding?
Yes, Dr.
Yes?
Yes.
I'm talking about the practices, the basic leadership practices, and I'm trying to explain the first one. The first one here is they build relationships outside school community. And I'm trying to explain it by saying this. When we began this class, somebody asked me a question. how is Moi? How is Eldoret? You know, and I answered the way you can hear it. So I'm explaining number one by saying that you must have heard in what you heard that when he was here, he went into the community, participated in Harambes. When he was here, he joined us for funerals. When he was here, he visited the sick within our community. Is somebody hearing me about the basic leadership practices that this man, you know, kind of possesses? Are you getting me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Because
Dr.
I'm saying I cannot simplify the words more than that. Second, we are seeing building collaboration internally, you know, with the workers, you know, internally with the workers. Again, we can hear him. You know, basic leadership practices involve enhancing quality of teaching and learning, enhancing quality of teaching and learning. How do we ensure that we enhance that? We can again hear. That's why these things move together. You know, we are told so and so is the best academic leader, best CEO, whatever, in academic institutions of higher learning. And then we hear again conversely, the institution is the most sought after. You see, it's moving together. We're talking about basic leadership practices as having to do with enhancing teacher quality, that the teachers you have within that institution, if you find you don't have, you have to look for quality teachers, because only then will you serve the core business of the institution. Basic leadership practices involve really in enriching the curriculum, as it were, enriching the curriculum. Basic leadership practices include the disposition to restructure and redesign the organization so that you can reach the goal. It's about reshaping conditions for teaching and learning, if you like, in other words, reshaping the conditions to realize the core business of the organization. And finally, basic leadership practices have something to do with defining the values and the vision of the organization, as it were. So you see, in this, we cannot really pretend to exhaust what best leadership is, but really just to say that. I therefore conclude then this evening lecture by verbatimly going through this slide, maybe not verbatimly, because verbatim might undermine a few things. This is my personal conclusive thoughts on what educational leadership is all about. And that's why I put it in first person singular. And I'm saying here, having reflected on the various theories of leadership, having reflected on the various typologies of leadership approaches, call it instructional leadership, transformational, moral, and so forth, I strongly think that successful leadership is about the following. Is about, one, eclecticism. This is really my personal thought about this, that successful educational leadership, successful organizational, institutional leadership is about eclecticism. That is, it is about how leaders combine and blend the various typologies for desired results. Second, I think successful leadership is about a balance. It's not about this or that, but it's about a balance. That is to say, it's about how a leader's actions strikes a balance between really theory and practice. Thirdly, I strongly believe that successful leadership is about how a leader changes, how he alternates, how he blends leadership skills in time and space as their organizations or institutions, develops. So I'm trying to say that effective, successful leadership is not about choosing one style of theory, one style of leadership and saying this one will do it. No, it's about the ability to change, to alternate and blend leadership skills in time and space. Fourthly, I'm saying that in spite of all this, however, I'm saying wherever leaders find themselves, be it in educational institutions, be it in various organizations and institutions, leadership ought to have a concentrated focus on the core organizational or institutional business. That's why I'm saying, together with Robinson, 2007, that the more leaders focus their professional relationships, their work and their learning on the core business of teaching and learning, the greater the influence they will have on their students' outcomes. Number 5, I'm saying leadership, in my view, is first and foremost about people and not about things. In this kind of understanding, I'm saying that leadership must demonstrate, therefore, a genuine evaluation of oneself. This one has to do with, looking at oneself and considering the potential you have as well as the limitations you have. Leadership presupposes a following. Therefore, it ought to carry with it an element of institutional or organizational inspiration. That's why I'm saying leadership must demonstrate a genuine evaluation of one's potential as well as one's limitation. Once you do that, you are able to see the level, the point of influencing a following. I'm saying that leadership must demonstrate a genuine respect and trust in people, coupled with a genuine evaluation of their potential. Successful leadership, I feel convinced that it must demonstrate a genuine respect and a trust in people. And this genuine respect and trust in people must be coupled with genuine evaluation of these people's potential, so that you don't end up allocating a responsibility to somebody whose potential cannot achieve the desired goal. Leadership must demonstrate a genuine assessment of organizational or institutional goals and challenges in the light of the available resources. Remember, when we talk about resources, we must be able to see that people are the most ultimate resource in institutional or organizational development and improvement. Finally, I want to say that I don't think it is about being fixated on specific typologies or orientations. I don't think leadership is about fixations, about this is the best leadership style, this is the best leadership theory. No, it's about eclecticism, I say. Finally, I say that I strongly think that it is a combination of these observations that put together, that these observations will go beyond, will transcend, will go before what various authors generally refer to as qualities of successful leadership. That I'm trying to say, beyond what people talk about qualities of good or qualities of successful leadership, it is when we combine such kind of observations, when we put them together, we'll find ourselves going far and beyond really what we'll just call qualities. So leadership may not just be about qualities of a successful leader, the training of a successful leader, but rather, if we were to go through some of these reflections, for example, if you were to evaluate yourself and know that this is your limitation, that does not mean you cannot lead. For me, that means you'll now be able to move and bring in the qualities of those people who can be able to augment your limitations and so forth. That is my take about this discussion this evening. Maybe 2 responses and we call it an evening. Any? There is no hand.
Terry, can I say something quickly?
Yes, please.
I would like to hear your comment on whether or not successful leaders are always effective leaders.
I think your question is challenging enough for my mind. You're saying whether successful leadership is equivalent to, did you use the word effective or efficient?
Effective.
Effective. My quick take is that if you added effective, if you added on it efficient, then that would define a successful leader. Because it will be talking about what ought to be done and making sure that it is done. That's my quick response. And a second rejoinder, second comment, then we call it an evening. We wouldn't want to reach 9.
Yes, Mwalimu, if I may.
Yes, Waruku. Yes,
Yeah,
Waruku, I'm hearing you.
Thank you. I'm just observing that I think this leadership discussion has been very helpful, and particularly even when you're bringing it from the educational standpoint, it can be projected to the wider scope of things, including leadership generally in all other areas. And I'm also realizing just from some of the characteristics that you have enumerated, the quotations that have been there. And indeed, I think when Sam is talking about an effective and you're adding an efficient leader, I'm realizing that there's a way in which then leaders just deliver without even realizing that they are leaders. That when the leadership is matured in a way, then the leadership is not even concerned about being called a leader, because the leadership enjoys that which he or she does. And in that case, I think I would refresh and look at what Mahatma Gandhi was doing in India at a time when India was pushing for change, basically to gain independence. You're seeing a case where even when other players within the political fields are jostling and wanting to take leadership position X, Y, and Z, he was not even bothered about any of the positions. And yet, almost each and every person around there would still come and consult, and that the people themselves would also ask and to see what direction they will take. So that in terms of then the values that are there, I think very, very important. So for me, I would also then be indicating that Daystar and our Vice Chancellor should not be elevated too highly as we speak now. Why? Because that is when things start to go south. That we should actually realize that here is a leadership that is really epitomizing what we require. And indeed, that then should be able to help transform the institution, transform lives and all that, but who also requires a backup. And that transformation means if we have one person like a hero, we should be creating many more, so that through that we become even more effective. But I think I'm getting a lot more bored when everyone and everybody is outdoing one another to praise, because I don't think that is leadership. Thank you.
I hear you, Waruku. So I think that one is done. Let me now give some guidance away from this class, guidance that helps us now to move towards the end now. I've said at the beginning of this class that this is supposed to be more or less the second last formal class in terms of lectures. I intend to have my last lecture next week on a day like today. And the way I've organized is that last week, towards the end, we pulsated through something of educational philosophy that captures elements of how our beliefs and convictions punctuate and order what we do, both in private and in public spheres. Therefore, maybe before the close of tomorrow, I'll be asking Dr. Munyao to post an assignment that will be terminal. I'll be asking Dr. Munyao to post an assignment that will be terminal. I had really wished that, I don't know whether I'll be able, let me just try. Let me see. It's already made. Yeah, let me see. It's already made because I might not have time to explain it. Or maybe let it be posted first. Let me post, then we can talk about it through our chat platform. So it will come to us anyhow. So it will come to us, and then we can. My idea is we can be able to work on that assignment. And we think that in the light of the guidance, it should be submitted some days before Christmas. So the classes end next week on Tuesday. My specific classes, because I'm told some courses may proceed after next week, but my classes end next week. And then I'll give guidance. That assignment will be posted by tomorrow. And all I'm asking is, given what we've been talking about, is a kind of a reflective assignment whereby I'm giving some readings you go through, and then I'm asking you to reflectively write about your personal philosophy of life. If you are a teacher, your personal philosophy of education. If you are working outside the education sector, to be able to talk about that, that's what I'm talking about. So that once it's worked upon, it's being given about, you notice about 3 weeks of working without lessons in the course. It should be submitted maybe sometimes around 20th. It should be before Christmas. And that will be the terminal evaluation, your own contribution. About next week, there are two main topics that are, as it were, remaining. One major topic is about a topic on what we call comparative and international education, which is simply about, the benchmarks of comparing education across the world. Those of you who are teachers, you may have in your undergraduate done something about comparative education. That is what it is. So in my view, that is not the major thing remaining, and that's not what I'll be looking at majorly. What I feel is the major thing remaining that we could have finished today if that topic was done was an element on critical thinking, because as we reflect on policy, as we reflect on leadership, then the element of critical thinking comes to the fore. So that is the element I'll be talking about next week before we call it a day in the course. For now, I want to thank you, as always is the case, for finding time to attend this class. I don't take it for granted. It's not just for your degree, but it's something that enables us to reflect on our lives, reflect on our convictions, and reflect so that we can build and develop a new tomorrow, a new life. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Doc.
Good night, Mwalimu.